Thanks for joining us, everybody. And just to set some context to kind of why Will and I are here, at RTS, we are a managed service provider. So we become the complete IT department for small and medium-sized businesses. And so cybersecurity is very important to us because it's very important to our clients as well. And so what we've designed for you today is a conversation with around social engineering, some practical solutions on how you can learn to recognize these things, understand them. Will has some fantastic examples from real life. Will is one of our head technicians, engineers. He works directly with our clients on a lot of these issues and a lot of their security needs and requests. And so he's got real world practical experience with this on a day-to-day basis. So Will, thanks for joining us. And Will was a big, hugely influential in setting this whole presentation up. And so I appreciate him leaning into this with us. By way of kind of overview of the agenda, we'll talk through social engineering attacks, different forms of those attacks, so common indicators of phishing, and we'll break down what that is, empowering employees as a first line of defense. And then at the end, we have some cost-effective solutions. Just by way of example, right at the top, a lot of the solutions we get to at the end, if you use an internet provider, not internet provider, IT partner similar to us, they should be having all of these resources for you. If you're more independent or you don't have a provider, then we'll give you some tips on how to find some of these solutions and put them in place for you, for your organization. So the definition and significance of social engineering, it's a method used to manipulate individuals into disclosing confidential information, and there's a lot of psychological tactics that are involved. They'll try to get you to bypass security measures. They're gonna want you to circumvent any procedures and policies that you have. And so awareness is incredibly important, making sure that your employees are aware of all these things. And some common attacks that are that are used are impersonation tactics, scarcity manipulation, and urgency. So they will impersonate a trustworthy source or organization, and they'll look for sensitive information from you. They'll create a false sense of scarcity, like something is going to be lacking if you don't take action. And they'll put a sense of urgency behind it. They'll come up with a fictitious consequence if you don't take action like right away. And there's definitely psychology involved in this. Will, can you give us some examples of some of this? I know we were talking about this earlier. You had some good ones.
Yeah, I could sit here all day and go down anecdote after anecdote of seeing clients going through this kind of stuff. One that stands out to me when I see this was a client called in a panic. She had been made to get up from her desk and go to CVS and buy a bunch of gift cards. So she was in business development. She was executive admin to the principal of the business, and they did business development. It was not an unusual ask for her to be asked to get gift cards. But this time she got an email, was told to get an inordinate amount. I know it was in the thousands. I don't exactly remember the dollar amount. And she just got up, ran out because, of course, the thing said that this is urgent. Go ahead and do this right away. She got up, ran out, bought the cards, took pictures, sent them out. It wasn't after she had sent the picture out that her antenna, that I'm sure had been going off up until this point, finally full blare, right? And she called us in a panic. Can we pull this email back? I after I sent these gift cards, then I called the principal, and he said he hadn't asked me to do this. And what can we do? Well, the pictures are gone. You've sent them out. Even if we could pull back the email, they have the pictures and they have the cards, and so that was unfortunately not the only time that we've seen this. Again, these guys have gotten so very good at this. Like I was telling you before, there are pictures of in our head. The mental picture of a hacker is what we get from the movies. There's some guy who's a wunderkind. He's sitting at a computer and there's music blur in the background, and his is racing across the keyboard, and he's doing this thing. That kind of hacking is true, but more and more we see the social engineering as, because these guys have realized that um, businesses are hardening their infrastructure is making it more and more difficult for them to get in. So instead of spending all the time it would take to try to to work your way in, worm your way in past all the multiple layers of security that businesses are stacking up. How about just attacking people? Because hey, they know the like you said, the psychology of this. We like to click links. It's a thing, right? It's like opening a box and something pops up, something new. So they're working that angle, and they in most instances they get through.
Yeah. Yeah, and in that example, there was some impersonation of somebody above her, and then certainly manipulation and a sense of urgency created enough so that she left the office and physically went and got those cards. Um, the psychology behind it, and we touched on this a little bit, exploiting emotions, so fear, trust, curiosity. Um, they're going to craft emails and requests that are going to tap into those emotions that we all have. And so understanding that kind of what's behind the social engineering can help you recognize the scams a little bit easier. And we'll break that down as we go forward. There's different forms of social engineering, and they look differently. So we'll cover a couple of those, and Will, feel free to jump in after each of these and give an example. But phishing and spear phishing. So a little bit of a play on words. It sounds like the easiest way to explain it is it sounds like what it is. Phishing is casting a wider net. So a variety of deceptive emails. Yes, it can happen by text. We'll get to that a little bit later, but deceptive email tactics aimed at obtaining sensitive information, but this may be sent out on a wider scale. Spear phishing would be something more similar to what Will described earlier, where it's a more targeted approach. You're going after a specific person or individuals within an organization. Will, do you have an example on that?
Yeah. So like these things, like these, because there's so much money to be made here, these guys have honed their craft down to a science. So we tend to see the phishing attempts. So they send out, because they have crawlers out on the internet. They're crawling and they're grabbing stuff as it goes by, and so they find, I've got this email address. So then they go and they send a general message to everybody, right? So we get somebody responding, or somebody clicking on something, and that, say for instance, we got they have some sort of malicious code in this link that someone clicked on, and what that code is going to do: grab their contact list, upload it to some web server somewhere. That's it. Just upload this contact list, and then it deletes itself. But now they have all of your email contacts. So they know that Jane Doe sends emails to Krister Dunn. Spear phishing. Now I can send a spearfish email from Krister to Gene and say, do this, do this, do that. So the things that they play off of each other, because of course they're coming at this, they have to glean information to make this work all the better. So they send out
Right.
phishing, then they follow with some spear phishing.
Yep, casting a wider net and then going a little more targeted. It's a lot of times it's what we do when we're looking for new customers, right? You get like a broad set of information and then you narrow down. They're doing the same thing, but with malicious intent behind it. Phishing or voice phishing. Some of these terms are kind of funny to me, but phishing or voice phishing. It's where they're going to use phone calls, caller ID spoofing. They're going to make a phone call as part of this scam and try to get some information. I know one example we talk about sometimes. Will, I'd love another one from you. But if Microsoft calls you at your desk and says that they want to, they need to come into your system and help you fix something, when is Microsoft going to reach out to an individual at a business and try to fix something? It's a scammer trying to do something. Will, do you have another example from a client about this one?
Yep, we have quite a few. So let me just go start with this one. So we had a client. So like like we're going to go over later on in this, we tell folks if you get an email and it's soliciting you to do something that you don't normally do, try to do independent verification. So you get an email. This client got an email, and it was one of those. Hey, we're changing our banking. We're sending you new ACH information. Please don't pay the invoice to the bank that you usually do. We'd rather you route it to this bank. So of course, his antennas go off. He's like, I'm going to call and independently verify this. So he goes and he calls the client. Well, in this instance, they had done they had done their research because they had actually spoofed this person's phone number, right? So phone call, and he was able to talk to an AI generated voice, the person, confirm that it was them, that this all of this was legitimate, and he can go ahead and make this change and send the payment. Calls and say, I'm missing my payment here. I mean, that's the level of sophistication that some of these people are employing. That you call and you think you're talking to this person because, of course, you don't have a real relationship with this person. You speak with them a couple of words here and there, so you have some vague idea what they sound like. You called the number, someone answered, and you thought it was the person. You went ahead and did what you were supposed to do, what they asked you to do, and then find out later wasn't a person at all. You talk to AI, and of course
Yeah.
now, yeah, AI is starting to factor in this because, of course, you can spoof voices now.
Yeah. Thanks for that example. I know Will's audio cut out a little bit there, but the idea was somebody got an email that wanted them to call a specific phone number, and the fraudster had manipulated the information so well and used AI in order to imitate the person on the other end. And so that was an example of phishing, or of phishing. Moving on to smishing, this is where you're getting a text message, very similar to the emails we've talked about. Will, you had a good example of I think Maryland Transit Authority or something like that, related to text messages. But I know that I get text messages on both my
Just this
phones
morning.
all the time. So what's that?
Just this morning. Just
Yeah.
this morning. I mean, I, it was funny. We're preparing for this, and I get a text message, and it says you payment is due. My audio okay?
Your
Krister, is my
audio is
audio
going
okay?
in and out, but yeah, it's going in and out quite a bit,
Yeah.
but that's all right. So I can cover this example while Will's looking at this. Just this morning, he got a text that said it was from the Maryland Transit Authority, and you owe a toll immediately, or your registration is going to hit your vehicle registration, that kind of thing. And in Will's case, he knows, first of all, they don't. That's not how they look to collect debts. But it wanted him to click a link and and provide information, and he knows. One, that's not how they collect debts. He doesn't have any toll situations where he owes money. They would send you something in the mail, and so that's a good example of smishing. When you get a text like that or an email, you can always go directly to the source. So if you do have an account for tolls, you could log into that account directly, not clicking the link. Log into that account directly and look into it. That may sound like a personal example, but I know I, pay tolls all the time on business. And so I've gotten those texts too. And, nothing to do with anything. I've paid the toll already. Some common indicators on phishing attempts. When you're getting email addresses, it's not uncommon for suspicious senders' addresses. So they will mimic a legitimate address. So it might be AmazonCO.com or AmazonAI.com, something that looks legitimate but has been changed a little bit. And so it's really important to verify the sender's address. So if you've got an employee that gets an email, then it says, it's from Amazon or whatever. from one of your vendors and you owe them some money, double check the email address, make sure that it's accurate. And again, avoid clicking links in emails that are from unknown senders. Like one thing we talk about a lot is if you didn't request the information, if you didn't request something from somebody, don't click on a link from them. If it's a vendor and you said, hey, I need to, pay this bill, can you send me a link? Then, it's probably more legitimate. But if it's just randomly showing up, don't trust that. Another thing that they'll do is generic greetings and signature. A lot of times these spoofed emails will have very generic, dear customer. It lacks personalization. And their signature may be pretty bland and direct. It just have like a name and a phone number or something like that. That's pretty basic, just lacking personalization. That can be something that tips you off. Spoofed hyperlinks and websites. Will, I want you to cover this part, the hovering over URLs. So if you get an email that includes a link, and we've given some examples of these, but is there an easy way to tell if the link that's in that email is a legitimate link?
Yes. So, and of course, this is easier to do on a computer than on the phone. But if you move your mouse to the link, to the hyperlink, and I always tell folks, don't put your finger on the mouse, on the mouse button, because of course the instinct is to click it, to click on the link. But so just put your hand on the mouse, move it to right, and hover on the URL. You will get a pop-up, and it will show you the actual web address that's in behind of the hyperlink, and just look at it, right? So for instance, if it's Amazon, it's going to say amazon.com, right? If it's a government entity, it's going to say irs.gov, right? um, what these guys do, they just add one letter, right? Because our eyes would just kind of go over it. So instead of amazon.com, you might have amazon.com, right? Or amazongo.com, because they figure, some people have heard about this stuff, but if I'm just close enough, they'll just go ahead and click on the link anyways. So just hover over it and make sure that that link is actually going to the website that it's saying that it's going to.
Yeah, and the other thing that we talked about too is you can, again, being skeptical of the link, if it's related, and I know we're using Amazon as an order. We order things for the office through Amazon. I'm sure other companies do too, but it's just an example. But if you're getting a notification about an order being late or something and it wants you to click on a link, just go to the Amazon website, go to your vendor's website, check out what the actual order is through that trusted source. Don't bother clicking on the link. Just use the email more as notification that, oh, I should look into this, and go to the trusted source.
Yep. And
Go ahead.
and one other thing I'd like to say, what we're trying to do here is to kind of enhance your skepticism. Just be skeptical, and always view with suspicion any email or any kind of communication that has a hyperlink in it or an attachment in it. We've gotten to the point where uh, these guys they're basically counting on on our lack of skepticism, right? Our curiosity. They're counting on it. So kind of just go to I tell our clients all the time, go to the place where I don't click on links. I just don't. And
Yeah.
then if you when you get that spot, you'll click on fewer links, and then the opportunity for you to get infected will go way, way down.
Yeah. Yeah. Poor grammar and layout can also be indicators in an email. If there's grammatical errors, maybe double check that email and take a look at it a little more carefully. Professional organizations typically will use more of a standardized email communication. So it's something that they've kind of gotten a script down for and they're sending it out. And so if you're getting something from a major supplier and there's all kinds of misspellings in it, that could be an indicator of something to pay attention to.
We had
Suspicious
one quick
attack.
question.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but we had
No,
one
go
quick
ahead.
question come through. Is there a way, like it's pertaining specifically to this discussion about URLs, is there a way to validate if a URL is malicious?
Good question. Will?
There are a couple of ways, and to jump ahead of it, but it's
That's right.
actually something that we will directly address at the end of this when we talk about solutions. But yes,
Perfect.
there are a couple of ways to do that.
Perfect. Yeah, good question. And good question. Suspicious email attachments, being vigilant with unsolicited emails, and then scanning attachments. This goes back, we keep hammering this point home, and the reason that we keep hitting on these behaviors is, I think in order to learn things, we have to train ourselves. And so training yourself to be vigilant with these things, talking about it all the time, creating that culture within your organization where you're paying attention for this stuff, that if I didn't ask for it, why is it showing up? And just being careful with that. Scanning email attachments is another way to validate before you actually click on an attachment. Will, can you walk people through how to do this? I know that we have a service that does it, but how can people do this?
So there are a couple of ways to do this. And one way is, so we're trying to stay industry specific here and not go to vendors, but a lot of people use Office 365 for their email.
Sure.
And there's actually a license that Microsoft provides that will scan every attachment in every email that comes through the system. Gmail does the same thing, and now all the major email providers do it. It's just there might be costs associated with it, of course, but
Okay.
there's a way that it happens in the background, and you're not involved. It happens before you even see the attachment. But even if you
Perfect.
don't, even if, say you don't have any of those, you can. Almost everyone should have some kind of antivirus software installed on their computer. You can download the attachment, go into your downloads folder, right click on it, and there will be a scan option for whichever antivirus software you have, and it will run a quick scan just to verify that there's no malicious code or nothing inside of this attachment that will negatively affect you.
Perfect. Perfect. We've talked a lot about employees and about people. And so we're going to cover some ways to really empower your employees, because they're the first line of defense. And employee, really anybody in the company, from ownership straight on down to whoever's on the front line delivering service to your clients. Training them to recognize attacks. So there's placing a lot of importance within your company culture around training. There are services that will provide ongoing videos. Usually they'll come out maybe quarterly. There are services out there that will, provide those video trainings. You can find stuff out there online, recognizing social engineering, staying, aware of the different scams that are out there, and just building that vigilant workforce that is going to really validate things before you even get to a problem. Being suspicious of unsolicited communications, especially in a business setting. Like I feel like all of us on a personal level, our inboxes, I'm assuming, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but personal inbox is out of control because you're on every mailing list to everything you've ever bought. But on the business side of things, really verifying communications, having that healthy skepticism, and making sure your employees know that that's okay. It's okay to question things. And in the case that Will gave earlier of getting that email from somebody in leadership that says, I need this right now, and it involves a lot of money, creating that culture where the employee is not afraid to reach out and verify directly with that person. Like, hey, I just got this email from you. I know you put a lot of urgency around it. You're also talking about X $1,000. Like, I want to make sure this is legitimate. Creating that culture. Verifying the identities and not revealing sensitive information. So, Will talked about this a little bit earlier in relation to, you get that request and go to your source of information, go to your client database and call them back. Will, you had a great example we were talking about earlier where a client called in a problem, and kind of how did you handle that?
Yep, and it's well, Pedro put in something. Krister, let me just talk about what Pedro put. He put in a note about it's not only computers, and you're absolutely correct. And my apologies for my ISP acting up. But the example that Krister was talking about earlier this morning, I get a thing saying, "Hey, I owe some tolls, and go ahead and click this link and restart your computer, your phone, and then click the link again and put this in the." And they're basically walking me through infecting my phone. Yeah, our phones are, once upon a time, phones were just, you know, you used the phone to call, right? You flipped it open, you hit the buttons, you call. Now our phones have mini computers inside of our pockets, in pocket in bags, right? And all of our data is on here, right? Your banking information is on there. I mean, your whole life is on this device. So if they can infect your phone, they've walked away with a treasure trove of information that they can use to, they can monetize, and that's the whole goal here, right? Once upon a time, this thing was done for bragging rights. These guys did it so that they'll be the coolest person in their group. Now it's a money maker, and they're looking to monetize your information, to get behind your, to take advantage of your trust, get on your devices, get whatever information they can get from there, and use that to make money. So you're absolutely correct. It's not only the phone, it's not only the computer, it's every device that we use. Is your tablet, it's your phone, it's your computer, every device that we use, because everything's interconnected now, right? We have all the same information on all these different devices. And so all these different screens are multiple ways they can get through to you. And then so going back to where Krista was asking about verifying identities. So we're an MSP. We take calls all the time, and folks call in, they're asking for changes. You get Jane Doe call on the phone, and Jane says, "Hey, I'm locked out. Can you reset my account?" You go, "Okay, hang on for a second." And because this person is calling in, you have to create a ticket for them. You start the ticket, and yes, there's a client that in that client, there's a person called Jane Doe, but you're just a voice on the phone. So what we do and what we're trained to do is to let the person know, you called in about this issue. I just need to hang up and call you back on the number we have on file that verifies you before I can make that change. 9 times out of 10, the customer understands that you're protecting them as well as yourself, and they're fine with it. You have that 1 out of 10 person who's they're already flustered because things are going bad and not going well, and they'll raise Cain a little bit. But at the end of the day, we just have to be we just have to verify who we're talking to before we go and make changes. Or you get another ticket and someone saying, "Hey, we need to make this major change in SharePoint. All these files need to be removed from here and put someplace else or deleted." And you need to verify, does this person have the permissions to make that kind of wholesale change for our organization? And if they don't, just ask them to wait patiently, and you call who does, just to verify. We just have to trust and verify. I think it was Reagan who said that. But trust, yeah, trust, but verify. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, hey, I'm protecting you as much as we're here for that. We're here to protect you. That's our
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, and that's specific to our organization, but the example holds true pretty much regardless of industry. Every business has customer information on file to some degree. You've got phone numbers, email addresses, banking information, whether you're B2B or whether you're serving consumers directly. You've got personal information, company information on file. And so having that procedure in place, like Will talked about, having that procedure in place to make sure you're validating the correct person before you make any changes to anything or update payment information or anything like that. We covered this one, didn't we? Yeah, reach out directly to the organization to help confirm the requester. Checking website security. This goes back to the question that Clay asked earlier. Making sure you're on a valid website, identifying secure websites by looking for the HTTPS in the URL and the padlock symbol. Will, is the solution for this further in the presentation? Okay, great. So that's one way to validate that, and we'll get to a very specific solution towards the end. Using anti-phishing features and enforcing multi-factor authentication. Will, can you touch on anti-phishing features in emails, and then I can talk briefly about multi-factor authentication.
certainly. So I won't go into the weeds here, so people's eyes don't glaze over. But so every email you send out has what we call header information. It's basically the writing on the back of the envelope, to use the analog of old school mail. That header information has some identification information inside of it. So let's say Jane Doe. I'm sorry, I'm using Jane Doe a lot today. Jane Doe has sent out an email to someone else. That email comes and it says, this email came from Jane Doe. Jane Doe is from this organization, and there's a whole bunch of other things inside of it. Now, anti-phishing will be like, okay, this email came from Jane Doe at Gmail, but Jane Doe is at, to use his 365. Something's wrong. Is a phishing attempt. And I'm sure almost everybody has seen this. Your email gets quarantined, right? You go into quarantine, and there's a bunch of messages there, and because they failed the generic anti-phishing or anti-spam filter that your email provider has, and they've checked that back of the envelope, that header information, and the information just isn't right. There's something about that information that doesn't jar with what the email is purporting to be. So that's anti-phishing. And of 365, Gmail, all of the major email providers have some anti-phishing and anti-spam feature built in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's helpful. And I know you may have noticed too that I find in our anti-phishing stuff, I'll get a lot of times if I'm on a distribution list for somebody and you're on a mass email list, that can sometimes trigger that. So some of those emails may be legitimate, but it goes back to our kind of healthy skepticism. You know, if I have a couple people that I deal with a lot, I know I'm on their mailing list and I have to consistently go in and release them from quarantine, but I know that they're coming from them. And so I want to see them. So I do that. Multi-factor authentication is that that service of, you know, you're trying to log into a website and it wants to send you a text message. A lot of times this is in banking or other financial stuff. The CRM that we use for all of our, you know, prospecting and client information, that has it on there where you've got the app for the website on your phone, and when I try to log into the website, it pushes a notification to my phone, and I have to approve it. There's different forms of that, and there's third-party options for that we'll get to at the end. And so combining these features adds additional layers of protection. Here's where we'll get into a little bit more specifics on some specific tools that you can use. And again, if you're using a service provider similar to us, we provide all of these things for our clients. So does our competition for the most part. Just full disclosure, it's part of what we do. But if you're more independent, or you're in, you know, more of an independent shop or a smaller organization and you don't have a provider, Will's going to give you some cost-effective solutions that you can go out there and find. Some of them are free, some of them are you can find very cost-effective options for it. This one, I'm definitely going to let Will fully explain, the DNS Resolver port. Will, can you let people know how to find this and what it does? And I think this might be the thing that gets back to the question earlier.
Yes, it does. So DNS Resolver. So the way I like to explain this is, when you open a web browser and you're trying to go to a website, you type www.anything.com. Okay. And that takes you to the site that you're trying to get to. Well, that the computers, that is for our convenience, because websites they're linked to an IP address. So if we were doing if you were doing it the way the computer would prefer it, you'd be typing 192.168.4.5 to go to that website. But of course, that's clunky and no one's going to remember that. You're going to remember www.anything.com because it's catchy in your mind. Your brain will retain that information. Well, DNS is what resolves that www.anything.com to the actual number that's for the website. So you type anything.com, your browser goes out to what's called a DNS server and says, hey, we're trying to go to anything.com. What's the address for it? DNS says, oh, that address is 10.24.123.7. Your browser says, thank you. And then it takes you to that site. You never have to know what's happening behind the scenes. You just want to go to your anything.com and it works. Well, a DNS resolver is a piece of software that gets installed on your computer and sits in the system tray. That's the little box on the bottom right corner next to your date and time. And what it does, it basically verifies every website that you're trying to go to, because websites get they get compromised, right? You're trying to go to anything.com, but that morning somebody has gotten into anything.com and they've changed some links on there. So when you click those links, it's going to take you to their server and they're going to download stuff to your computer. Okay. What a DNS resolver would do is it keeps a database of websites they've gotten spoofed, of known spoof sites and all that kind of stuff. So you type something or you click on a link. Say let's say we got an email and we've done our due diligence. We've done everything. We looked at the URL. It looks good, and it's for somebody that we know. And we've done all our due diligence, and we're about to click on this link. Well, this malicious person was just a little bit better than your garden variety, and that link is going to take you to a site where that's going to download some malicious software on your computer. What the DNS resolver does, it stops it. You click the link and it says you're trying to go to anything.com, but there's a redirect on anything.com that takes you to 123 very bad website.com. I'm not going to let you go there. Sorry. So you click the link, nothing happens. It's done its job. It stopped it. So and all of this happens in real time. You don't have any delay. So the way it usually works is it the DNS server is somewhere that's local to you, and this service is actually free. You can Google DNS resolver, and there's some free ones out there. Of course, for businesses, they're a little bit more robust and for a fee. But it's a marvelous tool because it sits in the background, innocuous. It does this thing you don't even realize is there, and it saves folks because it's just an added layer of protection, helping you to stop that final that final leg for you getting something bad happen.
Awesome. Thank you. MDR and EDR, every industry has acronyms. Technology loves them too. Managed detection response and endpoint detection response. I know with the previous thing, you could Google it. How can people, what does this do and how can they find it?
So same with this. You can Google MDR, and there are tons of good solutions out there, good vendors with some amazing product. So this is your next gen antivirus. So the old gen antivirus was software you installed on your computer. It sat in the background, and what it did more or less was protect against some malware, and it scanned your computer on some interval. So it could be once a day, once a week, whatever it was. It scanned all the files on all the files on your computer compared to some library somewhere of known exploits. And if it found something, you got a thing saying, "Hey, this thing is bad. What do you want me to do?" So quarantine the file or delete it. That's how old gen antivirus works. EDR and MDRs are next gen. Computers are so much more powerful now that you can have active scanning happening on your computer all the time, and you won't notice it because you just have the computers are just that much more robust and have that much more resource. So they're next gen. They do more than just run scans on a period. They run scans, like I said, all the time. So you click on a link, and as soon as you click on that link and you're trying to download something, it scans it immediately. They do things like honeypot traps where they'll take a file. The root drive of your computer is where hackers usually like to get to, because once they get to root, they can get everywhere else. They'll throw some random files in there so that if something, as a trigger, like on a tripwire, if something were to happen on your computer, something was trying to change one of those files, immediately flares flew up, they lock your computer down, and they start to do mediation. So it's the next gen, literally next gen they don't want to use the word antivirus, but next gen solutions for remediating issues, 0-day problems, and stuff of that nature.
Awesome. Thank you. And Googling those terms should
Googling
get a list of
MDR,
options.
EDR would give you a list of options. There are a ton of good vendors out there. We don't want to be vendor specific here, but there are a ton of good options out there. And yeah. I definitely recommend Googling it.
Awesome. Awesome. Multi-factor authentication apps. We referenced this earlier. Some websites will kind of force this by, sending you a text. There are also applications out there that that you can use that will you'll essentially log in to websites in conjunction with this application, and it'll send you a push notification or give you a code that you need to enter. Will, fact check me. Did I describe that right? And and then how can they find this?
You did an amazing job with it. Yes. And so MFA, almost everyone uses these nowadays. There are a ton of them out there. They're mostly free. There's some that you have to pay for. It's as simple as going into your App Store or your Google Play Store and searching for MFA, and you'll see a bunch of options there. And what they are, they're basically another layer of protection, right? So we've come from once upon a time, all you needed to log into something was a username. Because I remember a day when you typed in the username and you didn't even have to type a password. You hit enter and you went in. So we went from that to needing a password to now, because I mean, computers are just so much powerful, and you can set a program to sit there and go through every known iteration and crack a password. Well, that you can do that, or with social engineering, you can get people to give the password away, or you just go lift up a keyboard and that might be a piece of paper with a password written on it, underneath it, right? So we've gotten to the point where we need an additional layer of security, and MFA is just, if you have this person's username and password, we need a token, some token that can generate numbers to verify that you are who you say you are. So if you have their username, their password, and their phone, well, then you are this person. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, yep, and those are your MFA apps.
Awesome. Before we get to the conclusion, let's talk about PAM. I hadn't heard about this one before. Privileged Access Management Solution. What is it? How do they find it?
So again, you can Google this. So the example I always use, and sorry, I'm gonna, you know what? I'll stay away. So you go to the piece of software, you go to a website, you need a piece of software, right? It's freeware. It's on you just Google it, type in the name, and it'll give it to you for free. They don't charge you anything. Wonderful. Well,
Maybe,
go ahead. You're just going to say something.
maybe like a document viewer or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. As a matter of fact, that's the one I was about to call before I checked myself. I don't want to. I don't want to run afoul. So you go, you click it, and it's free. It downloads, installs on your computer. Well, increasingly, these freeware programs, they come with piggybacks, because they're giving away. They're going to install something on your computer that you didn't want, you didn't need, with the freeware. And in almost every instance, you have the big click here to download, and then a tiny print on the very bottom, barely legible, will be, if you install this software, we have the right to install blah, 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 blah. So you install the freeware, it's working fine. All of a sudden, you start getting notifications all over the place. Every time you open a web browser, you get a whole bunch of ads for all kind of crazy stuff. You're like, what's this? My computer's infected. Well, yes and no. If you go to your control panel, add remove programs, and you go sort by date, you see the software you installed that you wanted to install, but then there'll be 2 or 3 other programs that you didn't install and you didn't know were installed on that same day because of piggybacks. So this is where PAM comes in. PAM is a piece of software that sits on your computer, and every time you try to do anything system related, so anything that's going to change the system, install software, rewrite some registry key or something, it asks you, do you really want to do this? So in this instance, I'm trying to install this freeware. My PAM pops up. Are you trying to install this? I say yes. It lets it through. By the time that piggyback tries to run, I'll get a second pop-up. Are you trying to do this too? No, I don't want to do that. Click no, and it will stop it. it's designed basically just to work to stop things from happening that you didn't intend to happen. And
Got it.
You can Google Pam. There are a bunch of great solutions out there for this as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Before we get to questions, I'll just hit a brief conclusion and then wanted to just put an offer out there to you. So if we could kind of narrow it down to three things, it's the importance of awareness. Be aware of all the different scams out there and the way that that is evolving: email, phone, voice, text. Put some preventative measures in place. We've covered some. There are free and or very cost-effective versions of this. If you use a provider similar to us, reach out to them, make sure these things are in place, and get an understanding on what they have. And then the biggest piece is employee training, making sure that they're aware of it, making sure that everybody in your organization is comfortable double checking before they actually change account information, spend money, anything like that. We've done this today as a resource to the local business community. You see behind me our core values. One of them is to help first. So if we can be of any help with not just questions right now, but after the presentation, if you have questions, I dropped my contact information in there. We'd love to connect with you and do what we can to help you. And one of the things we love about the Better Business Bureau is just creating a kind of an ecosystem of companies that are trustworthy and want to do business with each other. And so we're glad to be part of that, and glad to be doing this today. What questions do you have, if any?